Most men would have screamed the moment they found out the truth. They would have packed a bag, caused a scene, and filed for divorce that same afternoon. But Julian wasn't most men. He understood that true revenge requires patience. He waited 7 agonizing months for this exact moment, sleeping next to a woman who had been lying to his face since the day they met. It was Christmas morning, and the living room was packed with Sienna's judgmental parents and her successful siblings. Everyone was watching as Sienna reached for the heavy, velvet envelope nestled deep in the branches of the tree. She was expecting the deed to a vacation home, a reward for being the perfect mother. Instead, her trembling hands pulled out a paternity test with a 0% probability stamp in bold red ink. The silence that hit that room was heavier than concrete. She looked up at Julian, expecting to see anger, but all she saw was a cold, satisfied smirk. She didn't know it yet, but the DNA test was just the opening move. Julian had already sold the house, canceled the cards, and packed her bags. This is the story of how a 7-year lie met a lifetime of consequences. To understand the brutality of what happened in that living room, we have to rewind the clock 7 years. We have to go back to the moment the trap was set. Julian wasn't a fool. In fact, he was a sharp, analytical logistics manager who prided himself on seeing details everyone else missed. But Sienna was different. She wasn't a detail, she was an event. They met at a charity gala in downtown Chicago. Julian was there for work, Sienna was there looking for a target. She was vibrant, funny, and seemed to have this magnetic pull that dragged Julian out of his shell. For a guy who spent his life building spreadsheets and managing supply chains, Sienna felt like pure chaos, the good kind. They dated for 3 months, just 3 months. It was a whirlwind of expensive dinners, late-night drives, and the kind of intense romance that usually signals a red flag to anyone watching from the outside. But Julian was blinded by the light. He was 32, single, and honestly a little lonely. When Sienna told him she loved him after 4 weeks, he said it back. He didn't know that she was already calculating his net worth. He didn't know she was digging into his family history, checking his credit score, and sizing him up not as a partner, but as a provider. Then came the news. It was a rainy Tuesday in November. Sienna sat him down, tears streaming down her face, shaking like a leaf. She told him she was pregnant. Julian froze. They had been careful, or at least he thought they had. But looking at her terrified face, his protective instincts overrode his logic. He didn't ask for a test, he didn't ask questions, he just hugged her and promised he would take care of everything. That was the moment the cell door slammed shut, and he didn't even hear the click. They got married in a courthouse 2 weeks later. Sienna insisted on it. She said she didn't want a big wedding, she just wanted to be his wife and start their family. Julian thought she was being humble. In reality, she wanted to lock down the legal contract before the baby arrived. 7 months later, little Leo was born. The moment the nurse placed that baby in Julian's arms, his entire world shifted axis. It didn't matter that the pregnancy math was a little tight. It didn't matter that Leo had lighter hair and different eyes. Julian looked down at that helpless infant and made a silent vow to be the father he never had. He cut the cord. He stayed up for the night feedings. He was the one who learned how to swaddle perfectly while Sienna recovered, or rather, while Sienna rested. For the next 7 years, Julian delivered on his promise. He worked like a dog. He took a promotion that required more travel and more stress just to afford the house Sienna wanted in the suburbs. It was a sprawling 5-bedroom place in a gated community, the kind of house that screams success. Sienna drove a luxury SUV, lunched with the other moms, and posted endless photos on social media captioned, "My boys" and "Blessed life." To the outside world, they were the golden family. But inside the house, the dynamic was shifting. Julian became nothing more than a wallet with a pulse.
He would come home exhausted after a 12-hour shift, hoping for a warm meal or just a conversation, and Sienna would be too tired from her day of shopping and yoga. She started making subtle comments about his salary, hinting that it wasn't enough, that Leo needed private tennis lessons, that she needed a new wardrobe for the season. And Julian, driven by guilt and love for his son, just worked harder. He missed birthdays because he was closing deals. He missed anniversaries because he was securing their future. He convinced himself that this was what a man does. He provides. He sacrifices. He adored Leo. That boy was his shadow. They built Lego sets together, went fishing on weekends, and Julian saw himself in the kid. Not physically, Leo looked nothing like him, but in mannerisms. The way he laughed, the way he focused on a puzzle, the way he walked. Julian projected his own soul onto that child. He never once suspected that the boy he was raising, the boy he would die for, didn't share a single drop of his blood. He was living in a meticulously constructed fantasy, and Sienna was the director, ensuring the lighting was just dim enough that he never saw the cracks in the set.
The cracks in the foundation didn't appear all at once. They started as hairline fractures, invisible to the naked eye unless you were looking for them. And Julian wasn't looking. He was too busy keeping the roof over their heads. But the universe has a funny way of forcing the truth into the light, usually when you least expect it. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in late May. 7 years into the marriage, Leo was excited about a summer soccer camp, an elite program that cost $3,000 for 2 weeks. Naturally, Sienna said it was essential for his development, so Julian signed the check. But the camp required a comprehensive physical and updated medical records. Sienna was arguably too swamped with her Pilates schedule to take him, so Julian took the morning off work to shuttle Leo to the pediatrician. It was a routine visit: height, weight, reflexes. Then the doctor, an old man who had treated Leo since he was a toddler, started filling out the camp forms. He mumbled something while reviewing the digital chart. He said, "Okay, everything looks good. No allergies, blood type AB positive, just like we have on file." Julian was scrolling through emails on his phone, half listening, but his brain snagged on that sequence of letters. AB positive. Julian paused. He looked up. He knew his own blood type was O negative. He was a universal donor. He donated every 8 weeks like clockwork. He also knew Sienna was A negative. He remembered it specifically because during her pregnancy, there was a minor concern about Rh incompatibility that turned out to be nothing. Julian wasn't a biologist, but he was a man of logic. If he was O and she was A, an AB child was mathematically impossible. He asked the doctor to repeat it. The doctor looked at the screen, adjusted his glasses, and confirmed it. AB positive. Julian felt a cold prickle of sweat on the back of his neck. He tried to rationalize it immediately. Maybe he remembered Sienna's type wrong. Maybe the lab made a clerical error years ago. He didn't make a scene. He didn't question the doctor. He just took the signed form, bought Leo an ice cream cone on the way home, and dropped him off at school. But the seed was planted. And once that seed is planted, it grows fast. That night, after dinner, Julian decided to test the waters. He was washing dishes while Sienna sat at the island sipping a glass of expensive red wine, complaining about a friend who had bought the wrong shade of curtains. He kept his back to her and asked casually, "Hey, do you remember what your blood type is? The doctor asked about family history today." Sienna didn't even look up from her phone. She said, "A negative. Why?" Julian froze. He turned off the faucet. He dried his hands slowly. He turned around and looked at her. He said, "Because the doctor said Leo is AB positive. That's not possible if we're O and A, Sienna." The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Sienna didn't look confused. She didn't offer to call the doctor. She went on the offensive. She slammed her wine glass down so hard the stem snapped. She stood up, her face twisted into a mask of pure indignation. She accused him of calling her a whore. She screamed that he was looking for a way out, that he was trying to abandon his son because he didn't love them anymore. She cried hysterically, the kind of loud, sobbing performance that makes you question your own sanity. "How dare you?" she screamed. "I nearly died giving birth to him. I gave up my body for this family, and you're standing there talking about high school biology classes?
It's a mistake. Labs mix things up all the time. You are disgusting for even thinking it." She stormed upstairs and locked the bedroom door. Julian stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of the evening. And he did what good men often do. He blamed himself. He thought he had crossed a line. He thought he was being paranoid. He spent the next 3 days sleeping on the couch, apologizing, buying her flowers, begging for forgiveness. Sienna eventually forgave him, but she punished him for weeks with cold shoulders and silence. But the dynamic had shifted. Julian's apology was verbal, but his mind was still running the numbers. The logistics manager in him couldn't let the discrepancy go. He stopped asking questions, but he started watching. He noticed how Sienna guarded her phone like it was the nuclear launch codes. If he walked into the room while she was texting, she would angle the screen away or lock it immediately. He noticed that she had changed her passcode. He noticed that she was spending a lot of time at the gym, yet her gym clothes never seemed sweaty when she came home. Then came the timeline check. Julian dug up the old calendars from 7 years ago. He looked at the date Leo was born. He looked at the date they met. Sienna had claimed Leo was premature, born 3 weeks early. But looking at the photos from the delivery room, Leo was 8 pounds 6 ounces. That's a big baby for 3 weeks early. He started doing the math on conception dates. If Leo was full term, the conception date wasn't 3 months after they met. It was 2 weeks before they met. The nausea hit him in waves. He wasn't just suspicious anymore, he was terrified. He realized he was sleeping next to a stranger. But he knew he couldn't accuse her again without hard evidence. The last time he tried, she nearly nuked the marriage. This time he needed proof, concrete, scientific, undeniable proof. He needed to know if the boy he loved more than life itself was actually his. And he knew exactly how to get it without her knowing.
Julian knew that if he confronted her without absolute certainty, he would lose everything. Sienna was a master manipulator. She would flip the narrative, call the police, file a restraining order, and take Leo away before the ink dried on the divorce papers. He needed to be surgical. He needed to be invisible. The next morning, Julian waited until Sienna left for her Pilates class. He walked into the bathroom, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He took Leo's toothbrush, the Spider-Man one he had bought him last week, and sealed it in a sterile Ziploc bag. Then he took a few strands of hair from his own hairbrush. He drove 3 towns over to a FedEx Dropbox to mail the samples to a private accredited lab in Texas. He paid extra for the expedited confidential results. He didn't want anything coming to the mailbox at the house. But while he waited for the science to do its work, Julian decided to follow the money. If Sienna was lying about the biology, what else was she lying about? He logged into their joint bank account. He usually just glanced at the top-line number to make sure they weren't overdrawn, but this time he downloaded the raw data for the last 5 years. He exported it all into a spreadsheet and started filtering. What he found made his stomach turn. There were cash withdrawals, hundreds of them, $200 here, $500 there. Grocery store cashback transactions, ATM withdrawals at gas stations. It was a slow, steady bleed. Over 7 years, it added up to nearly $60,000. Julian sat there, staring at the screen, trying to understand. Sienna had credit cards for everything. Why did she need 60 grand in untraceable cash? He needed eyes on the ground. He bought a magnetic GPS tracker online, and at 2 in the morning, crawled under Sienna's luxury SUV and slapped it onto the chassis. 2 days later, the tracker pinged. Sienna wasn't at the gym. She was on the other side of the city in a neighborhood that definitely didn't have a Pilates studio. Julian pulled up the app on his phone while sitting at his desk at work. The dot was stationary in front of a rundown apartment complex near the industrial district. Julian felt a surge of adrenaline. He left work early, claiming a migraine. He drove to the location, parking his sedan 2 blocks away behind a dumpster so he wouldn't be spotted. He put on a baseball cap and walked toward the complex. There it was. Sienna's gleaming white Range Rover, the one he paid the lease on, parked next to rusted sedans and broken glass. Julian crouched behind a parked van and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20.
Finally, the door to apartment 4B opened. Sienna walked out, but she wasn't alone. A man walked out with her. He was tall, ragged, with tattoos creeping up his neck and a cigarette hanging loosely from his lips. He looked like bad news wrapped in denim. And he looked familiar. Julian squinted, his brain frantically searching his memory. Then it clicked. He had seen this guy in an old photo album Sienna claimed she lost years ago. This was Ray, the abusive ex she had told horror stories about, the man she claimed she fled from because he was dangerous. But she didn't look scared now. She was laughing. She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a thick white envelope. She handed it to Ray. He took it, counted the contents, cash, and grinned. Then he leaned in and kissed her. Not a friendly peck, a long, passionate, possessive kiss. Julian felt like he had been punched in the throat. She wasn't just cheating. She was funding her loser ex-boyfriend with Julian's hard-earned money. She was stealing from their family to support the very man she claimed to hate. But then the knife twisted deeper. As Sienna turned to leave, Ray shouted something. Julian was too far away to hear it clearly, but the wind carried 3 words that shattered whatever hope Julian had left. Ray shouted, "Tell the kid happy birthday from me." Julian froze. Leo's birthday was next week. The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. Ray wasn't just an ex. Ray wasn't just a lover. Ray was the father. Sienna had been playing the longest con in history. She had taken a stable, high-earning man like Julian and turned him into a surrogate wallet to raise Ray's child, while she funneled cash back to Ray to keep him happy on the side. Julian was paying for the house, the food, the clothes, and the upbringing of another man's son, while that man sat in an apartment smoking cigarettes and spending Julian's money. He watched Sienna get into her car and drive away. He didn't follow her. He couldn't. He was shaking too hard. He sat on the curb, hidden by the van, and buried his face in his hands. The scale of the betrayal was absolute. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a parasitic infestation. He drove home in a daze. When he walked through the door, Sienna was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. She looked up, fresh-faced and innocent. "Hey, honey, how was work? You're home early." Julian looked at her. He looked at the woman who had just kissed a convict and handed him a wad of cash. He looked at the woman who had lied to him every day for 7 years. Every "I love you" was a lie. Every family photo was a prop. He wanted to strangle her. He wanted to scream until his vocal cords snapped. But he remembered the tracker. He remembered the bank statements. And he remembered the DNA test that was currently being processed in Texas. He forced a smile. It felt like shards of glass in his mouth. Work was fine. Just a headache. Julian walked past her, went into his office, and locked the door. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, staring at the wall, letting the rage harden into something cold and heavy. He wasn't going to divorce her. Not yet. Divorce was too easy. Divorce meant she got half. Divorce meant she got alimony. No. Julian wanted total destruction. He wanted to burn her life to the ground so thoroughly that she would never crawl out of the ashes. And to do that, he needed to wait for Christmas.
The email arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Julian was sitting in his car in the office parking lot, staring at his phone screen. The subject line was innocuous: confidential test results, case 9092. His thumb hovered over the screen. He knew that opening this file was a point of no return. Once he saw the truth, he couldn't unsee it. He couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. He took a breath that rattled in his chest and tapped the screen. It was a PDF document. He scrolled past the technical jargon, past the genetic markers, down to the summary section at the bottom. There it was, in bold, black text. Probability of paternity? 0.00%. Conclusion: the alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the child. Julian dropped the phone. It clattered into the cup holder. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just felt the air leave the car. It was a vacuum. For 7 years, he had defined himself as a father. It was his identity. It was his reason for waking up. It was his reason for enduring the stress, the traffic, the long hours. And in 1 second, a PDF file stripped it all away. He wasn't a father. He was a mark. He was a victim of the cruelest kind of theft imaginable. He drove home in silence. When he pulled into the driveway, he saw Leo in the front yard, kicking a soccer ball against the garage door. The boy looked up and waved, his face lighting up. "Dad, what's this?" Leo shouted. Usually, Julian would have hopped out, tossed his jacket aside, and played goalie. But today, he couldn't move. He sat behind the wheel, gripping the leather until his knuckles turned white. He looked at the boy, really looked at him. For the first time, the veil of love was lifted, and he saw the biological reality. He saw the shape of Ray's jawline. He saw Ray's eyes. He saw the genetic imprint of the man who was currently spending Julian's money. A wave of nausea hit him so hard he had to open the door and dry heave onto the pavement. Leo ran over, looking scared. "Dad, are you sick?" Julian looked up at the boy who called him Dad, the boy who trusted him. And the darkest thought of all entered Julian's mind. I can't look at him anymore. It wasn't the kid's fault. Leo was innocent, but Leo was a living, breathing monument to Sienna's betrayal. Every time Julian looked at him now, he wouldn't see his son. He would see Ray. He would see the lie. The bond didn't just snap, it rotted instantly. He wiped his mouth and stood up. "I'm fine, Leo. Go inside. Tell your mother I'm home." His voice was cold, robotic. Leo flinched, confused by the tone, and ran inside. That night was the lowest point of Julian's life. He sat at the dinner table, pushing food around his plate, listening to Sienna chatter endlessly about the upcoming holidays. She was in full social climber mode. "Since your bonus is coming in," she said, pouring herself another glass of wine, "I was thinking we should host the big family Christmas this year. Invite my parents, my brothers, everyone. Show them the renovations. Oh, and Julian, I saw this incredible pair of diamond earrings at the jeweler downtown. They would match my dress perfectly. For the party." She smiled at him. A predator, smiling at its prey. She was asking him to fund a party to celebrate their perfect family in front of her relatives, and she wanted diamonds as a reward for her deception. He looked at her. He felt hollowed out. A part of him wanted to grab the steak knife and stab it into the table. He wanted to throw the DNA test in her face right then and there. He wanted to tell her he knew about Ray, about the cash, about everything. But he stopped. If he blew up now, what would happen? A messy divorce. She would play the victim. She would tell everyone he was abusive. She would use Leo as a pawn. She would drag it out for years, bleeding him dry with legal fees while she moved Ray into the house Julian paid for. No, that wasn't justice. That was just a messy breakup. Julian needed something final. He needed to destroy her reputation so thoroughly that her own family would turn their backs on her. He needed to ensure that when she fell, there was no safety net. He looked at Sienna. He felt hollowed out. A part of him wanted to grab the steak knife and stab it into the table. But he stopped. "You're right," Julian said softly. "I am?" "Yes," Julian said, forcing the muscles in his face to form a smile. It was dead in the eyes, but Sienna was too self-absorbed to notice. "We should host Christmas. Invite everyone, your parents, your brothers, the cousins. Let's make it the biggest event we've ever had. And the earrings? Go look at them again tomorrow. If you're going to be the hostess, you should look the part." Sienna squealed with delight. She ran over and hugged him, smelling of expensive perfume and deceit. "Oh, Julian, you're the best. This is going to be magical." Julian didn't hug her back. He let her wrap her arms around him, standing stiff as a board. Over her shoulder, he stared at the calendar on the fridge. December 25th was 3 weeks away.
He had 3 weeks to move his assets, 3 weeks to talk to lawyers, 3 weeks to set the stage. He was going to give her the Christmas party she wanted. He was going to gather her entire audience, and then he was going to drop the curtain.
The next morning, the countdown began. 21 days until Christmas. 21 days to dismantle a life 7 years in the making. Julian woke up with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. The depression was gone, replaced by a cold, mechanical drive. He kissed Sienna goodbye on the cheek, a kiss that meant absolutely nothing, and drove to work. But he didn't go to the office. His first stop was a high-end divorce attorney named Marcus, a shark known for destroying spouses in the courtroom. Julian sat in the leather chair, laid out the DNA test, the bank statements, and the photos of Sienna with Ray. Marcus looked through the file, raised an eyebrow, and whistled. "This is nuclear," Marcus said. "In this state, paternity fraud is a heavy claim, especially after 7 years. Usually, the court assumes you're the father because you signed the birth certificate. You're on the hook for child support until he's 18. Julian felt his blood run cold. "So I pay for another man's kid?" "Normally, yes," Marcus said, leaning forward. "But you have proof of fraud. You have proof she knowingly deceived you while funneling marital assets to the biological father. That changes the game. We can file for a disestablishment of paternity. It's rare, it's hard, but with this evidence, we can sever your legal rights. But you have to be smart. You can't let her know you know. If she senses you're moving, she'll drain the accounts and hide. She won't know. I'm planning a party." For the next 2 weeks, Julian played the role of the doting husband perfectly. He encouraged Sienna to spend. He told her to hire the best caterers for the Christmas party. He told her to buy new furniture for the living room so the house looked perfect for her parents. While she was distracted with menus and decorations, Julian was liquidating. He opened a separate bank account in his name only at a different bank. He slowly transferred his personal savings, keeping the joint account looking normal by leaving just enough to cover the bills. He contacted a real estate agent friend and prepared a pocket listing for the house. He couldn't sell it without her signature yet, but he had the paperwork ready to go the second the divorce was filed. Then, the piece de resistance. Julian contacted the landlord of the apartment complex where he had seen Ray. He posed as a private investigator. A little cash greased the wheels, and he got a copy of the lease agreement for apartment 4B. The lease was in Ray's name, but listed Sienna as the emergency contact and, crucially, guarantor. She had co-signed for his apartment. This was the smoking gun that proved the financial link was ongoing and legal. But Julian didn't stop there. He wanted to make sure the audience for the reveal was captivated. He told Sienna, "You know, since we're having your whole family over, we should make a video montage, a year in review, to show everyone how great 2025 was." Sienna loved the idea. "That's so thoughtful. We can play it on the big screen TV during gifts." "Exactly," Julian said. "I'll edit it myself. I want it to be a surprise." So, night after night, Julian sat in his office, ostensibly editing clips of Leo's soccer games and their vacation to Cabo. In reality, he was scanning the DNA documents. He was scanning the bank statements highlighting the cash withdrawals. He was scanning the photos of Ray. He was building a slideshow, but it wasn't a celebration. It was an indictment. The hardest part was Leo. The boy was excited for Christmas. He kept asking Julian what he wanted from Santa. He looked at the kid and felt a mix of pity and detachment. He bought the boy gifts, expensive ones, a new gaming console, a bike, not because he wanted to be a dad, but because he knew this was the last thing he would ever give him. It was a severance package. He felt like a monster for thinking it, but he knew he couldn't stay in the kid's life. Every time he saw Leo, he saw the betrayal. He couldn't be a part-time dad to a kid who wasn't his,
constantly reminded of the woman who ruined him. He had to cut the limb to save the body. 3 days before Christmas, Sienna came home with the diamond earrings. She was glowing. "They're perfect, Julian. Thank you so much. My mother is going to be so jealous." "You deserve it," Julian said, watching her put them on in the mirror. "You deserve everything that's coming to you." Sienna didn't catch the double meaning. She was too busy admiring her reflection. On Christmas Eve, the house was buzzing. The caterers were prepping. The decorations were up. It looked like a magazine cover. Julian walked through the rooms, touching the walls. He had paid for this paint. He had paid for these floors. And tomorrow, he would burn it all down. He went into the study and printed one copy of the DNA test. He folded it neatly and placed it in a premium jewelry box, the kind that usually holds a necklace. He wrapped it in gold paper and put a bow on it. He wrote a tag, "To Sienna, the truth you've been waiting for." He placed it under the tree, right at the back. Then he went upstairs, packed a single suitcase with his clothes and essentials, and hid it in the trunk of his car. He checked his phone. The lawyer had the papers ready to file at 9 a.m. on December 26th. The trap was set. The players were in position. All that was left was to light the fuse. Christmas morning arrived with the blinding white snow covering the lawn. Picture perfect. By 10 a.m., the house was packed. Sienna's parents, Robert and Martha, were there, sipping mimosas and criticizing the rug placement. Her brother, a flashy real estate agent, was bragging about his latest sale. The cousins were running around. It was loud, chaotic, and fake. Julian played the host. He poured drinks. He laughed at jokes that weren't funny. He complimented Martha on her dress. He was calm, unnervingly calm. Sienna noticed he was quiet, but she assumed he was just tired from work. She was basking in the attention, showing off the house, the food, the life she had stolen. At 11:30 a.m., everyone gathered in the living room for gifts. This was the main event. Sienna sat in the center of the room on the velvet armchair, Leo at her feet. Julian stood by the fireplace, leaning against the mantel, a glass of whiskey in his hand. It was a little early for whiskey, but he needed the edge off. They went through the motions: socks, sweaters, toys for the kids. Leo opened his gaming console and screamed with joy. Sienna opened the diamond earrings Julian had let her buy, gasping theatrically. "Oh, Julian, you spoil me," she cooed, blowing him a kiss. Her mother nodded approvingly. "He's a good provider, Sienna. You're a lucky girl." "I am," Sienna said, beaming. "One more," Julian said. His voice cut through the chatter. The room quieted down. He pointed to the small gold box deep under the tree. "I got you something special this year. Something I think you've earned." Sienna looked surprised. She wasn't expecting another gift. She reached under the tree and pulled out the box. It was heavy, expensive looking. The room went silent, anticipating more jewelry. Maybe a matching necklace, a car key. Sienna untied the ribbon. She lifted the lid. She frowned. There was no velvet cushion, just a folded piece of paper. She looked up at Julian, confused. "What is this? A voucher?" "Read it. Out loud." Sienna unfolded the paper. As her eyes scanned the header, Genetics Laboratory of Texas, her hands started to shake. The smile evaporated instantly. She read the first few lines silently, her breath hitching in her throat. She looked up at Julian, her eyes wide with terror. She tried to crumple the paper. "No," Julian said, his voice loud and commanding. "Read the highlighted part, for the family." "Julian, can we talk about this in the kitchen?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Read it!" Julian roared. The sudden aggression made everyone jump. Leo looked up, scared. Sienna's father stood up. "Now see here, Julian." "Sit down, Robert, or you can leave." "Sienna, read the result." Sienna couldn't speak. She was hyperventilating. So Julian walked over, snatched the paper from her shaking hands, and turned to face her family. "Since she's shy, I'll do the honors," Julian announced. "This is a DNA paternity test for Leo, and it says here, with 99.9% certainty, I am excluded as the biological father." The silence was deafening. You could hear the snow falling outside. "What?" Martha gasped. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Julian asked. He pulled a remote from his pocket. "Let's check the replay." He pointed the remote at the 65-inch TV mounted above the fireplace. The screen flickered to life. But it wasn't a family montage. The first image was a bank statement. Highlighted in red were the cash withdrawals, $60,000, stolen from our family account over 7 years. The next slide. The lease agreement for Ray's apartment. Here is the apartment she's paying for a man named Ray. The next slide. A photo Julian had snapped with a telephoto lens 2 weeks ago. Sienna kissing Ray outside the apartment. The room erupted. Martha screamed. Robert looked like he was having a heart attack. Sienna lunged for the remote. "Turn it off! Julian, stop it! You're ruining everything!" Julian held the remote out of reach and pushed her away, gently but firmly. "I didn't ruin anything, Sienna. You did. You slept with your ex-boyfriend 2 weeks before we met. You got pregnant, and you realized Ray was a broke loser who couldn't pay for the life you wanted. So you found me. You found a sucker with a good job and a soft heart. You pinned this child on me, and you've been laughing about it for 7 years." He turned to the TV. The final slide was a picture of Leo next to a mugshot of Ray found online. The resemblance was undeniable. "He's not my son," Julian said, his voice breaking for the first time. "I loved him. I raised him, but he's not mine. He's Ray's." Sienna collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. "It was a mistake! I was scared! Julian, please, I love you! We can fix this!" "Fix it," Julian laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "There is no fixing this. My lawyer filed for a disestablishment of paternity this morning. I'm suing you for fraud. I'm suing for every penny I spent raising another man's child. And the house? It's on the market. You have until the new year to get out." He looked at Leo. The poor kid was huddled in the corner, crying, not understanding the specifics, but understanding that his world was ending. Julian felt a pang of agony, but he shoved it down. "Ask Ray for child support," Julian said to Sienna, who was now clutching his leg. "I'm done." He kicked her hand away. He walked to the front door, grabbed his coat, and opened it. The cold air rushed in. "Merry Christmas," Julian said, and he walked out.
The fallout from that Christmas morning wasn't just messy, it was catastrophic. Julian didn't just walk out of the house, he disappeared. He checked into a hotel, turned off his phone, and let his lawyer, Marcus, handle the carnage. Sienna tried to fight back. Oh, she fought dirty. She went to the courts claiming abandonment. She tried to use the psychological parent doctrine, arguing that because Julian had acted as the father for 7 years, he was legally obligated to continue paying. Biology be damned. In many states, she might have won. But Sienna had made a fatal error: the paper trail. During the discovery phase of the trial, Marcus presented the bank statements showing the payments to Ray. He presented the lease agreement. He presented the text recovered from her cloud backup where she explicitly discussed keeping the secret with Ray to keep the money flowing. This wasn't just a case of mistaken paternity. It was criminal fraud. It was theft by deception. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for manipulation, looked at the evidence and threw the book at her. The ruling was historic. The court granted the disestablishment of paternity. Julian's name was stripped from the birth certificate. His child support obligation was set to 0. Not only that, but the judge ordered Sienna to pay restitution for a portion of the living expenses Julian had provided over the last 7 years. Of course, Sienna didn't have the money.
She had spent it all on appearances and her loser boyfriend, but the judgment hung over her head like a guillotine, ruining her credit and ensuring she would never financially recover. The house was sold, the proceeds were split, but after paying Julian's legal fees and the restitution judgment, Sienna walked away with nothing but her clothes and her leased car, which was promptly repossessed a month later. And what about Ray? The bad boy she sacrificed her marriage for. The moment the money tap turned off, so did his affection. When Sienna showed up at his apartment with Leo and a suitcase expecting a romantic reunion, Ray laughed in her face. He didn't want a family. He wanted a paycheck. He let them stay for 2 weeks before he got tired of the crying kid and kicked them out. Sienna, the woman who once looked down on everyone from her suburban castle, was forced to move back into her parents' basement at 34 years old, humiliated and penniless. Leo's fate was the only tragedy in the story. Julian never saw the boy again. It was a harsh, brutal decision that kept him awake for months. He missed the kid. He missed the Lego building and the bedtime stories. But he knew that maintaining a relationship with Leo meant maintaining a tether to Sienna. He couldn't heal if he kept the wound open. He had to sever the limb to survive the infection. He heard through the grapevine that Leo was struggling, acting out in school, confused why his dad vanished. It broke his heart, but he reminded himself, I didn't abandon him. His mother stole his father from him before he was even born. 6 months later, Julian was sitting in a cafe downtown. He looked different. He had lost the dad bod, hit the gym, and was wearing a suit that cost more than Sienna's old car. He was scrolling through his phone when he saw a familiar face clearing tables. It was Sienna. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was frizzy, her makeup was gone, and she looked exhausted. She was working as a waitress at a mid-tier lunch spot. She was wiping down a table when she looked up and locked eyes with him through the window. She froze. For a second, Julian saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. Maybe she thought he would come in. Maybe she thought he would save her one last time. Julian just stared at her. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He looked at her with the indifference of a stranger passing a piece of trash on the sidewalk. He took a sip of his espresso, put on his sunglasses, and turned his attention back to his phone. He had a date that night with a pediatrician, a woman who had her own money, her own life, and most importantly, her own truth. Sienna watched him ignore her. She watched him get into his new sports car and drive away, and in that moment, she finally understood the cost of her lie. She had traded a king who adored her for a joker who used her, and now she was the punchline. Julian never looked back. He learned the hardest lesson a man can learn. Trust is a currency, and once you spend it on the wrong person, you go bankrupt. But you can always earn it back with yourself. He realized that biology isn't just about blood, it's about truth. And a life built on a lie is just a rented room. Eventually, the landlord comes to collect. Sienna thought she could play the game forever. She thought she was the player. But on that snowy Christmas morning, she found out she was just the losing hand. She stole 7 years of his past, but he didn't let her take a single second of his future. That is the story of Julian and the Christmas reveal. What do you think? Was Julian too harsh for cutting off the kid, or was it the only way to escape? And what would you have done if you opened that DNA test? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more. We post the darkest, most satisfying revenge stories every single week. Until next time, check your facts, check your circle, and never sign the certificate until you're sure.